The U.S. presidential elections aren't just a domestic event. They have profound implications for the rest of the world. The outcome can influence global economies, international relations, and even conflicts across continents. U.S. elections affect regions like Africa and Asia, shape global policies, and impact security issues, including war and peace efforts. The influence of American leadership on the global stage reaches far and wide. The global reach of U.S. elections. Let's begin with the basics. The United States, as one of the world's superpowers, holds considerable sway in international politics, trade, and security. When Americans cast their ballots, they're not just deciding the future of their own country, but influencing the trajectory of global affairs. Economic influence. The U.S. economy is the largest in the world, and its policies can set trends that ripple through international markets. A change in the U.S. administration can lead to shifts in trade policies, sanctions, and foreign aid, which can affect both developed and developing nations. For instance, a president who advocates for protectionist trade policies might impose tariffs on imports, which could trigger a global trade war. On the other hand, a leader who favors globalization and free trade could open new opportunities for international businesses. Developing regions like Africa and Asia, which are increasingly integrated into the global economy, would feel the effects of such policies almost immediately. U.S.-Africa relations. The U.S. has long been a key player in Africa's development through trade, aid, and military cooperation. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which provides duty-free access to the U.S. market for eligible African countries, is a prime example of how U.S. policies directly influence African economies. The renewal or termination of such programs depends on the U.S. administration in power. Moreover, U.S. foreign aid is vital for many African countries, particularly in areas such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure development. A shift in priorities, like a focus on military aid over humanitarian assistance, could drastically alter the progress of various African nations. Security and counterterrorism. U.S. involvement in counterterrorism efforts in Africa is another crucial aspect. Countries like Somalia, Nigeria, and Mali have been battlegrounds in the fight against extremist groups such as Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram. The level of U.S. military engagement in these regions often depends on the administration's foreign policy stance. A president favoring interventionist policies may increase military support, while one advocating for isolationism might reduce U.S. presence, leaving regional forces to manage these threats independently. Climate change and environmental policies. Africa is one of the most vulnerable continents to the effects of climate change, despite contributing the least to global carbon emissions. U.S. leadership on climate action is vital for the continent's future. A president committed to environmental agreements like the Paris Accord can push for global efforts to combat climate change, benefiting African countries that are facing droughts, floods, and other climate-related challenges. Conversely, a president who withdraws from international climate commitments could slow down global progress, leaving Africa to bear the brunt of inaction. Impact on Asia. Asia, home to some of the world's largest economies and fastest-growing populations, is another region significantly influenced by U.S. elections. Let's explore a few key areas of impact. U.S.-China relations. Perhaps the most consequential relationship in Asia, and arguably the world, is that between the U.S. and China. U.S. elections can lead to changes in this dynamic, affecting everything from trade to security. A president who adopts a hardline stance against China could escalate tensions, leading to trade wars, military posturing, and even a new Cold War-like scenario. On the other hand, a leader who seeks cooperation could ease tensions and promote collaboration on global issues, such as climate change and public health. The U.S.-China relationship also affects other Asian countries, particularly those in Southeast Asia. Nations like Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines often find themselves caught between the two powers, having to navigate a delicate balance in their foreign policies. A change in U.S. administration can alter the regional equilibrium, forcing these countries to recalibrate their strategies. North Korea and nuclear issues. North Korea remains a critical security issue in Asia, and U.S. elections play a significant role in determining the approach to this challenge. A U.S. president who favors diplomacy and negotiation could engage with North Korea in peace talks, potentially leading to denuclearization agreements. Conversely, a leader who adopts a more confrontational approach might increase military tensions, raising the risk of conflict on the Korean peninsula. The outcome of U.S. elections also affects the broader nuclear non-proliferation efforts in Asia. Countries like Japan and South Korea closely watch U.S. policies to determine their own defense strategies, including the potential development of nuclear capabilities in response to perceived threats. Trade and economic policies. Asia is a major hub for global trade, and U.S. economic policies have a direct impact on the region. A U.S. administration that pursues trade agreements with Asian countries can open new markets and foster economic growth. Conversely, protectionist policies like tariffs and trade restrictions can disrupt supply chains and hinder economic development in the region. For example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which was negotiated during the Obama administration but later abandoned by the Trump administration, was a key trade deal that would have linked the U.S. to several Asian economies. The fate of such agreements often depends on the outcome of U.S. elections, influencing economic opportunities for countries across the region. War and conflict. The U.S. as a global policeman. One of the most debated aspects of U.S. foreign policy is its involvement in wars and conflicts around the world. The role of the U.S. as a global policeman has varied depending on the administration in power, with significant implications for global stability. Middle East conflicts. U.S. elections have a profound impact on conflicts in the Middle East, a region that has long been a focal point of U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. military presence in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan is often dictated by the president's approach to war and peace. A president who advocates for military intervention might escalate conflicts, while one who favors diplomacy and withdrawal could lead to de-escalation efforts. The U.S. also plays a critical role in mediating peace processes, such as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. A president's stance on issues like the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital or the two-state solution can either fuel tensions or promote dialogue in the region. The Russia-Ukraine war. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine is another area where U.S. elections can have a significant impact. The level of U.S. support for Ukraine, including military aid and sanctions against Russia, is closely tied to the administration's foreign policy stance. A change in leadership could alter the course of the conflict, either by increasing pressure on Russia or by reducing U.S. involvement, potentially leading to a shift in the balance of power. Global arms control. U.S. leadership is also critical in global arms control efforts. Treaties like the New START, which limits the number of nuclear weapons held by the U.S. and Russia, depend on the commitment of the U.S. administration to arms reduction. A president who prioritizes arms control can help prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, while one who withdraws from such agreements could spark a new arms race, increasing the risk of global conflict. Global governance and multilateralism. Finally, let's discuss the role of the U.S. in global governance and multilateralism. The U.S. has traditionally been a leader in international organizations such as the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and the World Health Organization. However, the level of U.S. engagement in these institutions often depends on the administration in power. A president who believes in multilateralism will strengthen these organizations, contributing to global efforts to address issues such as poverty, health crises, and human rights. Conversely, an administration that favors unilateralism might weaken international cooperation, leading to a more fragmented and unstable world. The U.S. plays a critical role in global health initiatives, especially through organizations like the World Health Organization, the WHO. The response to pandemics, such as COVID-19, has highlighted the importance of U.S. involvement in coordinating international health efforts. A U.S. administration that actively engages in global health governance can lead to stronger international responses, improved vaccine distribution, and enhanced research collaborations. However, an administration that withdraws support or funding from these institutions could leave gaps in global preparedness, potentially allowing future pandemics to escalate unchecked. Human rights and democracy. Promotion. U.S. elections also influence the country's stance on promoting human rights and democracy worldwide. American leadership has historically supported efforts to advance human rights through multilateral organizations, such as the United Nations Human Rights Council. A president committed to these values can strengthen global initiatives aimed at protecting freedoms and advocating for marginalized groups. On the other hand, an administration that deprioritizes human rights in favor of national interests may weaken international pressure on authoritarian regimes, potentially emboldening them to suppress dissent without consequence. Conclusion. As we've seen, U.S. elections have far-reaching consequences that extend well beyond America's borders. From Africa to Asia, and from trade policies to military conflicts, the decisions made in the U.S. have a profound impact on the rest of the world. As we approach the next U.S. election, it's essential to remember that the outcome will shape not only the future of the United States, but also the global landscape. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on global affairs.